Welcome to Cal State Northridge's Chem 334 series. My name is Alex Mentonona.
And I'm Stephen Ruark.
And we're going to go ahead and lead you on your journey through organic chemistry 2, the lab portion that is. So today we're going to go ahead and review the Diels-Alder reaction. So if you'll go to page 44, that's where we're going to get started. Now, the Diels-Alder reaction is a 4-2 cycle addition involving a diene and a dienophile, and I'll let your lab instructors and of course your lecture instructors go over that a little bit more. But today we're going to go ahead and highlight the actual experimental details. So before you get started, there's a few notes that I want to make sure that we go over. The first is please do not wash any of your equipment with water. If you're going to do any rinsing, you're going to make sure you do it with acetone. Now, as far as experimental setup goes, I'm going to go ahead and let Stephen take over from here.
All right, the equipment we're going to need today is a stir plate or a hot plate, a sand bath. We're going to need some clips or clamps, 2 clamps, pipette bulb. We're going to need a thermometer, which make sure you check to make sure that the blue is not broken. It's one continuous line. You're going to need a boiling chip, which is just right here, this little tiny one, only one needed, a round bottom, a drying tube, an air reflux condenser, cotton, a scupula, a clip, and calcium chloride. And also pasture pipettes.
So once you have your 3-sulfolene and your maleic anhydride, as well as your xylenes inside of your reaction flask, you're going to go ahead and put it into our sand bath. Now, when we put it into our sand bath, we don't want it just at the surface. We want to get it at least a little bit, deep into the sand. That way we get good heat transfer. Now, we'll go ahead and close that up. Make sure it is attached nice and solidly. And if you'll notice, in the sand bath, we'll already have our thermometer set up and clamped in. Now, this is very important. Please do not take your thermometer off and just lean it up against the bars. That's a very easy way to break a thermometer, and it happens quite often. Now, once you have your chemicals set up inside of your round bottom flask, we'll go ahead and take the air-cooled reflux condenser. And you may want to put just the smallest amount of grease to make sure that the 2 glass joints don't fuse the high heat. We'll go ahead and put it in there. We will move it around just a little bit, make sure they are nice and tight. And oftentimes, if you don't have 2 Ket clips, you may actually want to adjust the clamp so that it holds both your reaction flask as well as your reflux condenser together. So I'm just going to go ahead and shift this up just a small amount. That way we can go ahead and pull them 2 together with our clamp. Now, once this is set up, the next thing that we're going to need to attach is our drying tube. Now, when you make your drying tube, you're going to get a small piece of cotton. You're going to go ahead and push it in. Oftentimes you can use a little spatula or a pipette. Just be careful not to break the pipette. You'll loosely push that in. It doesn't have to be packed tight into the end of your drying tube. Then you'll get some of your drying agent. In this case, we're going to use calcium chloride. The calcium chloride we'll go ahead and open up. We'll take a scoop of it using our scupula. And of course, we want to be careful here. And we'll go ahead and just pour it in. And if a little bit of it spills, just make sure you clean it up at the end. Now, oftentimes you'll use about 1 or 2 scoops worth. And we just need a little bit of a column here. You can go up to this far, you can do this much, but as long as you have at least about an inch or a few centimeters worth of calcium chloride, you should be good for most typical reactions. Once you're done with it, you make sure you close the calcium chloride bottle to make sure that it doesn't go bad when exposed to the moisture in the air. And then you'll just get another small piece of cotton and you'll just use it to kind of plug up the system. And again, you don't want this tight, you just want it so the calcium chloride doesn't fall out of your tube. You can go ahead and attach that And with either a cap with a hole or a cat clip, we'll attach them together to make sure they don't fall apart. And your reaction setup is ready to reflux for 30 minutes now.
Okay, so your reaction has gone for 30 minutes, or it's been refluxing for 30 minutes. So you can remove it from the sand bath, all right, and let it cool to room temperature. Once it's cooled to room temperature, you can go ahead and remove the drying tube. And we're using water for demonstration purposes, but just to consider this solvent, okay? So you're going to be adding some hot xylenes to this and kind of trying to rinse your product off the wall as much as you can. Then, while using a Pasteur pipette, okay, you're going to remove the liquid from the bottom and put it into a beaker or a flask. All right, make sure you get it all out of there. A little bit at a time, patient. Okay, then I recommend adding just a little bit more to try and keep your yield high. So wash it one more time with the hot xylenes and get it all out of there. All right, once you've gotten everything out of your flask, go ahead and get rid of or remove your round bottom. Okay, and then what you're going to do is now this is no longer hot xylenes. This is petroleum ether. Okay, and so this is cooled to room temperature, and then we add petroleum ether, drop like a few drops at a time while swirling. Okay. And once it becomes cloudy, or a solid starts to form, or it starts to crystallize out, or in other words, crash out, you want to stop adding the PET ether, okay? Then go ahead and warm it in your sand bath until that cloudiness goes away. So when you put it back in here, it's still warm. You want to just gently heat it, okay? And then once it becomes clear again, go ahead and remove it. Let it cool to room temperature again. Then once it's removed, or once it's cold, or room temp again, I ask you what's colder than being cold, and that's ice cold. So you're going to put that into a ice bath. At this point, everything's going to crash out, okay? And this is a good time to set up for the cold vacuum filtration. So for that, I've set up a flask up here, a sidearm flask with a Buechner funnel, okay, up top. You want to take the right size filter paper and put it in there. Then using your PET ether, go ahead and just wet that a little bit and hook it up to your vacuum, which is the yellow valve on the wall. Go ahead and you can just start pulling a vacuum, and that will seal the paper down solid, so you don't lose any of your product through it. All right, at that point, once this is, you'll have a bunch of solid in here. All right, you can go ahead and just pour it through, and there you go. You can use a little bit of PET ether to kind of rinse out any extra that you don't have, or that you didn't, or that's left inside the flask. And once it's pretty dry on top, go ahead and turn off your vacuum, and then you can remove your product.
So once you have sucked dry your product and allowed it to sit over the week, you're going to go ahead and finish up your experiment. You will then go ahead and, if my lovely assistant Steven would hand me the melting point capillary, you'll get a little piece of your crystal, get a small bit, and do your melting point just like you did in 333. Once you get your melting point and make sure it is a range, you will also calculate out your percent yield based off your limiting reagent, and you'll go ahead and turn in your experiment with your product in a product bag stapled and attached to your report. And that will be the end of your experiment. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email your instructor. Of course, talk to your instructor during lab or before lab or during office hours. And we will see you next time.
And remember, safety first.